Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the online panel, Press Freedom in the MENA region, 10 years after the Arab Spring. Today, we will be talking with our special guests. We have ICIJ member Ali Ibrahim, a co-founder and a CEO of Daraj, an independent digital media platform. Ali is based in Lebanon. We have another ICIJ member, Malek Hadraoui from Tunisia. Malek is co-founder and publication director of Intifada, a nonprofit media group, but also executive director of Al-Qad, a nonprofit organization which supports independent journalism. And we have Saja Murtada, a Lebanese investigative and data journalist with Arab reporters for investigative journalism, Arish. Welcome. I'm Jelena Ćosić, training manager with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, and I also coordinate our partnership in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Welcome you all. As we mentioned, today's topic is about Arab Spring, and it is one of the major historical events that happened during our time. Dozens of people protested against dictatorial regimes in the Middle East and North Africa. Today, we will talk how that affected press freedom in the region for the last 10 years, and what is the actually current situation in the region. Some of the reports note deterioration of media freedom. And this is the first question that I would like to ask all of our guests, is that, and I will start with you, Alia. How would you describe the current state of media in the Lebanon, but other countries as well?
Thank you, Jelena, for the introduction. I'm really happy to be here today. In a nutshell, you just mentioned the Arab Spring. We go back in mind to those inspiring images from 2011 that really raised hopes across the region, across the world, to be very fair. Fast forward 10 years, there's really nothing inspiring or optimistic in the general image across the region. If I looked at my own country, Lebanon, I'm sitting in Beirut today. Just last month, in terms of freedom of speech, Lebanon went from being in number 107. It is now at ranking, it was at 102, it's now at 107. Even in a country like Lebanon that relatively is considered more free than the surroundings, the situation is really bad. We're looking at a place that is suffering all kind of crisis, political and economic, etc. Right next door in Syria, the situation is beyond tragic. In Egypt, it's gone from bad to worse. Across the region, the general picture is a very bleak one. That said, I think if one looks at the objective indicators, yes, we were all very optimistic in 2011. Yes, we all wanted to see that democratization of societies was heading its way to a region that was really, in terms of general population, it has proven, and I think that was what was done in 2011. The people went to the streets and said they wanted democracy. Now, there was no infrastructure for democracy. There was no, the most obvious things would be independent media, independent journalism, a kind of journalism that can hold those in power accountable, and more importantly, maybe a judiciary. The infrastructure was not there. And if one look at the micro level, a lot has been achieved over the last 10 years. Yes, the dictatorships are still here. Yes, their holding into power is even more tragic than it was in 2011 because now they are being challenged. But the situation today is not worse than it was pre-2011. When it comes to freedom of speech, people are more vocal now. When a journalist is sent to prison or assassinated, people talk about it. If we look at all the indicators related to every single life indicator of democracy, we have improved. It has not yet been institutionalized. it's a very, very long road until we get to where we want to get as societies, especially at the institutional level. But I really think if we talk, for example, at independent media, the independent media like the ones you have here on board as guests today, like Daraj or like Intifada, able to, who did not exist actually prior to 2011. And I think in that sense, a lot has been achieved.
Thank you for that, Talia. Malek, what is the situation in Tunisia? Like some reports are noting that far-right politicians are openly targeting journalists, and that general climate for the media is worsening significantly. But Tunisia is mentioned as a success after Arab Spring in a different manner. What would you say? What is the situation?
Yeah, thank you, Jelena, and welcome to all the people who are looking to us and listen to us. Yeah, I think as Alia said, there is a lot of expectation and hopes in 2011. Tunisia, maybe it was the first country who triggered this so-called Arab Spring, and a lot of things was done in Tunisia, especially especially from a country going out from 60 years of dictatorship, and especially 25 years of Ben Ali's dictatorship, which was one of the most ferocious against press and press freedom and the work of journalism. In 2011, the media landscape in Tunisia was so bad that people, even the Tunisian citizens, don't even believe that we have media organization in the country. So we have a lot of things to do after that. But now, 10 years after, I think that is something that we gain definitely, this freedom of press, freedom to get organized, to create a media organization, and to investigate and to report on stuff. Yeah, it's true that during the last 2 years there is a little a new kind of threat coming from the rise of nationalism, far right, religious group who are threatening the journalists or the media, who are not, maybe representing what they think about what is the real role of a media organization, but it's still a threat that we don't perceive them as serious threats. I think one of the most difficulties during the last 10 years in Tunisia, because a lot of things was done in terms of institutional change and law change, and all the legal frame of the press work and the press freedom in Tunisia. The real problem today is an economical problem, with really hitting very, very hard the country. I think Alia can imagine what is to try to thrive or try to maintain a media business in a country with such economic difficulties. And this is, I think, today the biggest threat for media and journalists. It's the way its means to do their jobs is a solid media organization who can support good quality journalism. And this is what we are lacking today in Tunisia: good quality journalism, new media outlet who try to work for the independency of the organization. Today, unfortunately, most of the media organization, the private media organization, are depending on advertising. The advertising is depending on businessmen, and the businessmen are the first support of the political scene. So there is like this mix between politics, finance, and the pressure that they can have on media outlets. So today the pressure is not coming from police or the political police or from the dictatorship itself, but it's another kind of pressure and another kind of threat for journalists who try to maybe to touch or to investigate in certain interests, political and financial interests in the country.
Malek, I have to ask you, this is very something that we are seeing in Eastern European countries as well, that the pressure is coming because of economic reasons, among others, of course. What does media organizations in Tunisia are doing regarding that? How do they survive?
Few things. In Tunisia, there is maybe two major independent media outlets. Intifada, as created in 2014. There is another media outlet called Nawat, which is a very engaged and what we call the media activist group who try to sustain, but we also rely on grants coming from international donors or private donors, which is not something very sustainable in the long term. So we are trying to create new revenue stream, new ways to generate revenue, as in our country it's very difficult to start to implement subscription or membership program, which are the new way of sustaining a media business around the world. We know that the United States is something that already entered in the habits of the readers, and most of the media outlets shifted already to the subscription or the membership program. In our country, it's very difficult to rely on this kind of business plan, as the payment methods are not so developed. The culture of paying online or paying for media or news is not so developed also. So we have at least 10 years behind this trend of shifting to new business models. So the business is still very archaic, very based on advertising, but the amount of money coming from the advertising is decreasing, and so there is a big fight around this money, and to get the money, sometimes those media organizations or this media outlet are making compromises on editorial side, sometimes by not covering certain issue or not investigation in certain political and financial interests. So unfortunately, nothing really done to shift from this old, very weak business model to something new. So we are, even if Intifada tries maybe a membership program or subscription program, we are not backed up by an ecosystem to support that payment method, payment system, and also other media outlets who start to, in a way, to convince audience that the only way to assure independency for media is that the readers pay for the content and support the media organization. So yeah, we are very far in this field, and it's difficult for a media organization in Tunisia today to put in place a sustainable business model.
Malek, thank you very much. Saja, I think that the journalists and media situation in apart from Tunisia is a little bit different. Like, how do you see the situation? What has happened in the last 10 years in Lebanon, but in other countries as well?
Hello, Yelena. Hello, everyone. It is my pleasure to be with you and to be part of this panel discussion to talk about such a critical topic. Unfortunately, 10 years after the Arab Spring or the uprisings that fought for dignity, justice, and democracy, MENA region is still considered the toughest and most difficult and dangerous region for journalists and activists worldwide. As you all can notice, regardless of some few positive changes, there has been no significant change in MENA region, which maintained the last place in the rankings of World Press Freedom Index in 2021. The media community in MENA faces profound challenges, and media work has become now more complicated and dangerous. Many trends in press freedom can be documented after 10 years of the Arab Spring. To begin with, imprisoning journalists, for example, like what, for example? Also, criminalization of journalism. We are in the 21st century, and we still shout journalism is not a crime in every occasion, and we still demand our governments to give us the right to work in a safe environment without the fear of being killed, imprisoned, or targeted. For example, there is no independent media in the Gulf countries, and those directly responsible for the killing of Jamal Khashoggi haven't held accountable yet. And lots of my Arab colleagues sometimes publish their investigations under pseudonym names as an attempt to protect themselves from any risk. We clearly live in a deadly environment. Syria, Yemen, Libya are the most prominent examples where journalists face detention and killing by non-state actors, not only by the authorities. Here it is important to mention the situation of Palestinian journalists in Gaza, West Bank, and Jerusalem, who are always targeted by Israel in the aim of trying to hide its crimes against Palestinians. As the whole world saw in the last month, Israel bombs media offices, shoots, kills, and arrests Palestinian journalists to take down videos of brutality. Journalists in Palestine are always under fire and have zero protection. And in addition to all of this, Israel works with companies like Facebook to censor Palestinian voices and content on its platforms. And I remember 2 days ago, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu asked to ban social media twice during the latest event, and it's so dangerous. Journalists, in my opinion, journalists all around the world should speak up and demand. Oppressive authorities in the MENA region or elsewhere should know that if they kill or target a journalist, their story will attract more attention, not less. And that's what exactly happened in Palestine lately. And one of the noticed trends also is censorship of media or the control over the media, the surveillance of journalists and news outlets. And that was clear during the COVID-19 outbreaks. When authoritarian states imposed information blackouts, shut down media websites, targeted local and foreign journalists for presenting narratives different of their own. Some Arab governments also prevent conventional media outlets from fully doing their job, including having access to situations where very serious human rights violations are taking place. In addition, some Arab governments are using today the spreading of fake news and the misinformation crisis as a pretext to suppress freedom of expression and freedom of press. During the last few years, many Arab governments tried to pass laws addressing issues such as cybercrime and fake news that fail to comply with the international standards on freedom of expression. But fortunately, we have lots of attempts to combat misinformation crisis in the Arab world in the last few years. Lots of fact-checking units and freelance fact-checkers are working hard to battle fake news and to raise awareness also. And here comes the important role of Arab Fact-Checkers Network built by ICIJ last year with the emergency of COVID-19. The network is well needed and is a real opportunity to enhance fact-checking methodologies and support Arab fact-checkers in all possible ways. And when it comes to access to information, we notice a huge gap in the Arab world. Unfortunately, till now, most of the Arab countries don't have an access to information law. And the countries that have the law don't apply it. In Lebanon, for example, we have the right as journalists and as citizens to ask for information from all official organizations. But unfortunately, the law is not applicable. From my own experience, for example, during the last 2 years, I asked for information and data from the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, some courts in Lebanon. But as it was expected, I didn't get any. And their excuse was always that they don't have the information or they can't give us the information. But the truth is that they don't want to give it because they need to protect themselves and they are scared of the potential result of analyzing or sharing the information with the public. And as I remember once while I was working on one of my investigations where I wanted to ask for information from the Shiite Jafari court in Lebanon, I discovered that the law excludes religious courts because they have an unlimited authority and they are protected by the political system. In my opinion, information can be a matter of life and death, especially in time of crisis like COVID-19, wars, or economic and financial crisis like now in Lebanon. And here it is important to mention also that the lack of publicly available and reliable data has obviously created a vacuum for potentially misinformation and misleading content. And we have the right as journalists to ask for information while working on our stories, because the public has the right to be informed and to know what's going on in all sectors and to be able to hold corrupt people accountable. I always encourage journalists that attend the trainings, young journalists that attend the training of investigative and data journalism, to always ask for information, even if they know that they won't get it. Finally, Yelena, despite all these challenges and obstacles mentioned, I think Arab journalists didn't give up. We have now more independent journalists. They are doing a great job, producing great stories, confronting repression, and even they are trying really hard to improve their skills in all possible ways.
It's good that there is a little bit of hope at the end, not just all the dark moments. But thank you, Saja, for this. This was very informative. Alia, I would like to ask you about the role of media and how actually it is important for today's in the MENA region, and how impactful actually it is. We know that this year is also the 5 years anniversary of Panama Papers. Corruption as the main topic of many of the investigations has also been one of the reasons for the Arab Spring. Like, how do you see the role of media and the impact of media?
I think, thanks, Yelena, for this question. I think it's a good place to start analyzing how even what the role of journalism really is outside the scope of the journalists themselves, how you set a culture for accountability and to put an end for impunity. If you look at the general picture across the Arab world, when the Arab Spring erupted in 2011, the slogan across the region was, and the problem was across the region, unemployment. And you could see everywhere that young people's unemployment. The people, I covered the Arab Spring from Yemen to Libya to Egypt, and across every time I went, I would ask every time, why are you on the street? And people would answer me, better life. The more I asked about what better life meant, the answers were like really not, there wasn't really an understanding of the concept. And this is something that has evolved greatly over the last 10 years. I think another, for example, when you ask about the Panama Papers, I was still working in a mainstream, one of the leading TV stations in the Arab world, when the Panama Papers were being prepared. And we actually at the time received a copy before publication from Arish, which was partnering on the Panama Papers. The company I was working for, MyTV, refused to publish them at the time. Other media companies in the mainstream area did not want to publish this content, because even though later, after the Panama Papers became public, it was translated from English and published. So it's not like they could go on with this policy forever. The idea is the Arabic-speaking audience had to wait for days until the findings of the stories, which were very relevant to our region, until they were translated from English to Arabic. That was one of the reasons we decided to launch Daraj. And it was out of a serious belief that first, there are good journalists in the Arab world. The problem was not a problem of journalists. It was a problem of platforms. It was a problem of independent media, who, as Saja was saying a little bit earlier, are funded by either side of the conflict. It's always a business businessman, and if it's not a businessman, it's a political party, and if it's not a political party, it's a government. So what you needed is a platform that would publish this type of content. We looked at the need, and we thought there was something that looked at the region, not at the level of Lebanon only. One of those reasons is because the journalism we do is very expensive, and Lebanon is a very small country. So in that sense, from a business point of view even, it made more sense to be a pan-Arab and an Arabic-speaking, looking at all the region and building a network of journalists who are working together and publish accordingly. 10 years down the line, I can tell you, I mean, we unfortunately, we live in societies and in communities and in countries where people are exhausted, the journalists included. And yes, it's very frustrating for most journalists across the region to see that even when they succeed in publishing an amazing story with huge insights, and nothing happens. And nothing happens, and it gets stuck in judiciary. And the judiciary does not function in governments that are equally corrupt, and it's across the board. But there are some breakthrough. We're very happy at Daraj that since last year we've been working on a couple of investigations that have led to actual impact. Stories we have published with our colleagues in Siraj, for example, only recently about corruption in Syria and how reconstruction money is being stolen to refund the army of the regime, has led to an investigation just last week. This is just last week. An investigation at the level of the UN. Another story we published in Daraj has led to an investigation and a freezing of assets of the central bank governor of Lebanon in Switzerland and France and in the UK. This is very little impact given the amount of the corruption and given the amount and the size of the beast in the region we live in, but it gives us incentives. There is nothing more frustrating to a journalist than knowing it's almost like you're storytelling only, knowing that nothing will happen later. But it's a whole culture that needs to be changed. And we see change happening really very, very, very slowly. But it is happening. And one more point I would like to add. Most of this is happening today because of collaborations with partners from outside the region. Yeah, and the real investigations that are leading some kind of impact are the ones we're working on with partners who have access to information. For example, in the case of the central bank governor, most of the investigation that looked at his real estate was outside Lebanon because of Freedom of Information Acts and also because of changes in laws that happened after the Panama Papers, and that now makes it impossible for the owners of companies or structures to hide who owns companies. And this is how we discovered how much, and in collaboration, in this case with the OCCRP. Another collaboration to make, for example, again, Sajam mentioned the lack of accountability in the case of Khashoggi, but there is a collaboration that is being done with Forbidden Stories to make sure when journalists get killed, their stories don't die with them, and hence work together even further to make sure things like that don't happen. Those collaboration, and I think ICIJ took the lead on that with the Paradise and with the Panama Papers, and eventually with the Paradise Papers that Daraj very proudly took part in, is really as important as it is in the part of the world where accountability is already part of the culture. It's really a big achievement in our region, in the Arab region, where the road is still long until we achieve this kind of accountability.
Yelena, if you give me a chance, I wanted to add to what Alia said now about the global collaborations. International projects such as Panama Papers and FinCEN files led by ICIJ were so important, and their leaks and findings revealed obviously the dirty system that we live in that allows corruption, crimes and wrongdoings, and show how politicians or the elite that the people elected to rule their countries are not only involved in corruption, but are unfortunately leading it. So there is a huge significance of collaboration between investigative journalists across the border in the aim of producing more powerful stories that might lead to even regain the trust in the media. In the Arab world, we are suffering, as we mentioned, from huge social, economic, and financial crises So we need such collaborations to expose more politicians and businessmen how they are taking advantage of people's money for their own benefits, and to cover important stories that had been hidden for years and years from the public. Arab investigative journalists either are scared of working on corruption cases, or don't know how and need support to work on such stories, or don't have the chance to do it since the media outlets that they work for are controlled by figures or powerful families that are not only involved in corruption, but maybe they are the root cause of it. So we need such global collaborations more than ever nowadays to help us dig deep in areas where we are not allowed to dig alone, or because we have a lack of information. So, as we all can notice at the moment, the networks and most collaboration projects are still strongly based in the Western world. Journalists in the MENA region are looking for more collaborations, and I believe that ICIJ is giving them this chance by working with them on important stories and projects that can make a huge impact in their societies.
Thank you, Sajid, and thank you, Alia. Malek, you have been working on several ICIJ collaborations. What are the impact of not only Panama Papers, but other collaborations that you have been working on? And also, how do you find, what's your take on these global collaborations between different, not only regions, but continents and, basically around the world?
Maybe before, just to follow up on the question of the corruption, if we have time for that, as it's connected. I think that one of the major lessons that we learned from the Tunisian uprising, that democracy or even a free parliament and free institution didn't solve the corruption problem, and didn't also solve the economical problem also. So the democracy is not something, but it will solve all these kind of problems. So today, one of the major problems of the Tunisian young democracy is corruption. And I think that we saw that in a lot of other uprising or revolution, even in Europe, Eastern Europe especially, where the corruption became bigger and maybe became harder to fight under a democracy than maybe under a dictatorship. We have a big problem for that. So we started Kifada started to collaborate with ICIJ from the Swiss leagues before a big collaboration. We denounced some activity, illegal activities. We also gave names of people having assets abroad, illegally transferred abroad, but the judiciary system is not following, and there is a very weak political will to give the judiciary system the means and all the mechanism to suit this kind of people to bring the money back. I was listening to Will, I think, in the previous session, Will Fitzgibbon, and he was saying that maybe it's for some countries is not the idea of measuring how many money we recovered from the Panama Papers, Swiss leaks, or the other stuff, but how it's completely changed the mindset of the people. It really impacted the way that people perceive the question of tax evasion and how it's directly connected to development, to a better distribution of wealth, and so today I think that we won this fight by making those issues at the heart of any election that we have in Tunisia since 2011 and since Panama Papers. There is some candidate who was cited in the Panama Papers who their political career just stopped after that. They wasn't sued, they didn't give the money back, but I think that we can say that they're not going to be elected anymore in a way. So there is a positive, there is some positive point, I think, and the major problem still the lack and the weakness of our institution, especially the judiciary institution, with very weak instead the system, the old system who still, you know, when we talk issues, it's something really, it's something real in countries as Tunisia, coming from 60 years of dictatorship. And so it's very hard really to fight all those people behind the institution, behind the spotlight, and bring them to justice, and show people that there is a way to sue those people and to make them pay for what they are doing. And maybe this is the only way for us media to prove to the audience, or to the readers and to the citizens that our work is it's worth their support, and that we can change things. And maybe this is also one of the biggest frustration of people, that they saw that things are so hard to change. They know what they want to change. They identify the problems, but the possibility to make the change, even under a democratic, a young democracy, but still a democracy, it's very frustrating for everybody, and especially for us as media outlet. But the cultural change on tax evasion, a better distribution of wealth, and the connection between the fact that people are trying to hide their money in a paradise islands and all these places, it's directly connected to the situation, to the lack of investment, the misdistribution of wealth. And so I think that this point we already made it, and now we want just to show that if we persevere, we can really condemn people. We can maybe put someone behind bars because he was making tax evasion or other stuff. So yeah, the road's still long, but there is some fight that we already won, I think. On this
Malik, if I may, before we go too far from what you were saying, and just to say that what's happening in Tunis, we could look very much at the second wave of protests, be it in Iraq or in Lebanon. This direct relationship between those who are in power and corruption, and how that impacts the life of individuals, has become clear in the mind of communities. Yani, when in 2019, we saw the Iraqis go back to the streets, they were talking specifically about the issues related to electricity, to water cuts, to corruption. And these were it was not only about الشعب يريد إسقاط النظام. No, it was the people want to overthrow the regime. No, it was the people want better services, the people want their rights, the people want accountability. The headline raised in Lebanon was كلن يعني كلن, which means all of you means all of you, and it was talking about the whole political establishment, which is completely corrupt. Now it's the idea of actually holding those in power accountable was inconceivable 10 years ago. People thought that better what democracy meant something that was not tangible. Meaning that some people will have to go to prison. This idea that Malik was mentioning, that actually those powerful people can go to prison, did not even occur. And actually to a large extent at the level of wide audiences, it's still too many not possible to see those very powerful people being held accountable. And this is the beginning of it. And this is what has changed at the level of our work. I really think, yes, maybe there is a lot of complication, just one part of the whole, it's a whole infrastructure or an establishment that needs reforming, but things have objectively been changing. And I think the second wave of the Arab Spring is showing us a much deeper understanding of what democratization actually means. Just wanted to add that to what you're saying, Malik. So sorry to jump in.
No, no worries, because
no, you are completely right, and there is a question about that. That I think that if it's possible, that there is a new Arab Spring, and one of the elements I think of the common Arab Spring, maybe in Tunisia, the second wave, or in Iraq and in other Arab countries, that there is a conscience today that people now are aware of all this mismanagement problem, or this evasion problem, or this corruption problem, and they are today willing to stand and ask for people to be removed and people to be suited.
Actually, this was one of the questions by our viewers, so thank you for answering that. I want to say if anybody has a question, they can type in. But before, we are not going probably to cover all of the questions that we have received. One of the things that it's very interesting is that in what way can independent journalists work and actually not receive attacks? And is there something that journalists themselves can do to help this situation work for them better? What would be your experience with it? Saja, would you like to start? Is there anything that our colleagues actually can do to help themselves in a way?
Yes, sure. I think it is a bit hard to ensure the full protection to journalists while covering news, especially in repressive countries or in countries that suffer from lack of freedom of expression and press. But when the journalists are aware of their rights and in their in-depth knowledge of their country's law, and with some training on self-protection physically and digitally now, how they can have more privacy while working, might be of assistance to guarantee some protection and security in face of threats and abuse. And I think to help in achieving significant changes in this thing is collaborations of media outlets and the journalists during coverage is important, which help journalists to work in a safer environment, not fear expressing themselves and reporting their abuse, and knowing that through protesting or through using social media now, or even by doing their journalistic job, they can achieve what they aim for.
Thank you. Are there any solutions that can be applied in your work, not only from journalistic point of view? Is there anything that would work for the region? No matter who would need to apply it, international community, specific donors, or the public.
Of course, in the Arab region, we need nowadays freedom of press more than ever. I think that without freedom of press, we should really fear for our future, because we are suffering from corruption, several wrongdoings, human rights violation, lack of transparency. And here where the role of journalists come, where they have to dig deep and expose the truth. But I think some of the solutions is that we need more investigative journalism in the region now. Lots of Arab journalists still feel scared of entering the world of investigative journalism because of its risks. So we should encourage journalists in the region to work on investigations that cover corruption and human rights violations by training them more and supporting them legally, physically, and even psychologically. And I think also that institutions which train journalists should educate potential reporters on independent and critical reporting, because many journalists are biased towards political parties and scared of saying whatever they want without the fear of being targeted. So it is hard to make change in the Arab world because of the rampant corruption. And that is why we need to enhance investigative journalism. Here I want to mention the role of Arij, for example. Arij is working hard to enhance the concept of investigative journalism in the Arab world by training, supporting, and empowering journalists to work on stories that deserve to be known and told to the public. And I think, Elena, also, we need more citizen media, because as we all noticed, citizen journalists did a huge impact during the Arab Spring, during the wars in Syria and Yemen, the revolutions in Tunisia and Lebanon, and lately in Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood in Palestine, where they turned the world's attention to what's happening there and played a role sometimes more powerful than the role of some prominent media outlets. And I think one of the most important things that should be done, and we should work for it hardly, is to create and strengthen a legal or regulatory framework that is conducive to practicing journalism, media freedom, and the sustainability also in the journalism sector, especially the independent one. I think it's really hard to reach this goal, but if all independent media outlets and civil society organizations work together, I think we can do this, even if it will take a lot of time and effort.
Thank you, Sajja. Malek, is there anything that you would like to add? Are there any solutions that you want to suggest?
I think that one of the solutions that I think Alia talked about it, local investigative work need maybe to be supported by our colleagues around the world to highlight this work, to show it, to make the world see that it's possible. There is people working on the field in their country with all the difficulties that they have. Some of the problems that we are facing, they are facing it. Striving, looking for a business model who assure independency, access to information, making people accountable. That I think that we are fighting the same and reach or trying to do the same work. But some of the stories don't reach an international coverage, and some of them I think deserve the work that Daraj did on the president of the central bank in Lebanon. It's in the heart of economic political crisis. It's one of the major investigative pieces that the region saw during the last years, and unfortunately we didn't really see a lot of impact on the international media outlet. It deserves more, but for sure this is one of the way. I think the other way that for us to continue to make the link between corruption, corrupted people taken in their hand the economy of our countries with the impact, and show the direct impact on the life of the citizens, and not making this question of the corruption something very vague, but citing names, appointing responsibles, and push put the justice in front of the responsibility in front of the people, and said, okay, you have all the information, you have all the proofs, and you need to now to do your work in a way. This is one of the solutions, I think, that I joined totally Sajja when she talked about more maybe cross-border but regionally and south-south collaborations in some of the issues that are really common to us. We are trying to do, as we are a network already working together, sometimes publishing and help each other in our own investigation. But I think that we are so focused on our own sustainability, dealing with our challenges, local challenges, that we underestimate maybe the potential of doing more cross-border investigations between Arab media outlets. And I think that we can discuss and work more on doing possible for them in the country. Our outlet can also be journalists who don't have the possibility to do so.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you to look in a crystal ball now and tell me, like, where do you see a region in the 10 years from now, and where do you see press and media position in 10 years from now? Alia, where do you see it?
Well, I don't just see it, I think about it every day, and I work for it every day. And I really like to believe that as much as I want us to continue to be independent, I also want us to become, in terms at least of values and in terms of distribution, I would like to see us become more mainstream. We despite the amazing work that independent media is doing across the Arab world, we continue to be very small in size. I'll add to what Malik was saying, the stories, the investigations we did in collaboration with international organizations because of some of the coverage they got in leading media publications, when you get mentioned by the Financial Times or by Le Monde or by, it becomes impossible for local media not to mention you. And this is how you, until we become the mainstream, I think what we can do is put pressure on mainstream. When we uncover a story, and of course they can ignore us if it's just Daraj or Intifada, but they can't really ignore us when it's Reuters and it's the Financial Times and it's the Wall Street Journal and it's the Washington Post. So whenever you are part of a bigger story and wherever there is an actual impact happening internationally, yes, we don't have a judiciary here, but as we've been mentioning, most of the stories that we're dealing with are cross-border. Most of our very corrupt leaders take their money to Europe and to the West. So by following their money, we're actually uncovering tax evasion, we're uncovering that is of concern to a wider audience. And this is at the heart of those collaborations. So until we become bigger in terms of distribution, I think there is an edge that we have. Yes, it's very difficult. I'll tell you, for example, for last year, all year long, we could work on 2 investigations. We would have loved to work on 20, but our resources and the team of our size makes it possible for us to work on a couple per year, despite the fact of. And here, the regional collaborations has been amazing. We've been working as a publisher here and just editor and fact checker with our regional partners, with Siraj and MENA Region. And it's been a fascinating collaboration. They also have their international partners. We're seeing these partnerships growing and maturing year after year. They're becoming, even, I have to say it, they're becoming also, there is a recognition on all sides on what each partner puts on the table, which was not very obvious at the beginning. Language was a problem, communication sometimes, and the structure of the team was a challenge. But as time is passing by, it's becoming very clear to all the people involved how much those partnerships are actually adding to I think the resource that we all need the most, more even than money, is time. So the fact that you have this presence across the planet at the same time looking at things, and here we are talking high quality journalism. We're not talking about beginners. We're talking about really people who know what they are doing. And I really think I want to look 10 years ahead just to make it concise. I really think we are seeing a huge development happening incrementally, very slowly, but there is a big change that is happening, and it will have to impose itself it has to introduce those values, accountability, holding those in power accountable, giving the right to the public to be properly informed, and put an end to impunity.
Thank you, Saja.
I think that despite all the negative consequences of the Arab Spring and all the terrorism and turbulence and corruption that we as Arab countries are suffering from now, we have now more courage and braveness to speak up and demand for our rights regardless of the outcomes. I think that it is not easy now to be silenced or to see a wrongdoing and not take an action. So we should talk more about press freedom in the Arab world. We need to defend it more. And this is our responsibility as journalists in the first place, to fight for our right of working in a free and safe environment, to be able to make real changes in an area fed up with corruption and drawings. And after speaking during this discussion about all the negative and bad situations, I want to be somehow optimistic. I think it needs a lot of time, attempts, and efforts to make a real and permanent change in the state of press freedom in the Arab world, especially with the huge amount of corruption, crisis, and authoritarian regimes. But I am sure that with the rise of quality investigative journalism, the rise of independent media outlets and professional independent journalists, and with the collaboration between all main and relevant actors in the region, we can have some changes in the next few years, even if it will differ between country from a country to another. Like it may be easier in Lebanon and Tunisia, for example, but harder in Syria and the Gulf countries where we don't even have independent press to have any development in the state of press freedom.
Thank you, Malek. Where do you see a region in 10 years from now?
Yeah, I think I'm also optimistic as Alia and Saja. I really see it 10 years. 10 years is nothing, it's tomorrow. As we already have 10 years from 2011, so it's so much things were already done. I think that we are certainly going to in the same pattern that all the rest of the media outlets around the world, trying to reconnect with their audiences and trying to build their business model around the audiences, as we are seeing it. There is a few experiences started in Morocco, for example, in North Africa, and the market is starting to become something stable and sustainable for a media outlet. I share the wish and the work that we need to do to become, as media outlet, mainstream media outlet, and and impact more our audiences. And I'm very confident also about the level of consciousness of the next generation, the coming generation. Today in Tunisia, we have people sometimes for our training programs or our media literacy programs who didn't even know about the dictatorship. They just remember it's like it's history for them. And their relationship with police, with authority, with accountability, with what they are expecting for the media outlet is completely different from our parents, for example, or people, the older person. So the cultural changes here, the mindset in the field of the journalist and the media manager, I think is starting to change. And we are, I think, pioneers in the region and pushing to this cultural change. So 10 years, I think it will be something certainly better than today in terms of impact of our work, accountability for people who are mismanaging our countries. And I think that media outlet will have more support from readers and from their audiences. That's for sure. I think the only fears for me, when we see what the International Monetary Institution did to Greece or did to other countries when they was in very difficult economic situations, this is one of the things that can stop this progression and this path. And I'm thinking about Tunisia, I'm thinking about Lebanon, I'm thinking about other countries who can face this kinds of sanction or this kind of austerity measures imposed by this international institution. It will impact for sure our business model and our capacity to deliver this high quality journalism that we are seeking and aiming for. So my only fear is this one. The rest, I think I'm quite optimistic for the future.
I think, Elena, I think we should do the same panel discussion after 10 years and discuss the topic again to see what happens during this 10 years.
We're going to do it. I like the idea that you're all very optimistic about it. I like the idea that you see changes that has shifted from 10 years ago. And I like the idea that you have said things about media that even though there are attacks, there are pressures, there are independent media who is willing to push things forward. One of the questions I will just shortly address from the YouTube goes that will the cooperative work be possible for journalists who doesn't have large income? From the ICIJ point of view, I want to say that our partners worldwide are very known media outlets, but also super small newsrooms or even freelancers in small cities in Africa, in Asia, in Central Asia. So we do cooperate with the with journalists, no matter where they are actually coming from, and no matter with what media they work, as long as they have their professional skills. I'm gonna slowly close this panel. I want to thank you all for joining us today. I want to say that we heard how important it is to have independent media in the countries, but in the region as well. I would like to invite everyone to consider to contribute to their local journalists and to their local media. But I would also like to invite everyone to follow the Raj, NREJ, and Intifada's websites, because there are a lot of interesting and important and relevant topics at the moment, but more will come, I'm sure. And the same goes for ICIJ website. Thank you very much all for joining today. Have a great day.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
Bye.